Okay. I'd like to welcome you all to our fourth annual Lighting Up Recovery Breakfast, and we're pleased to have you here. And we want to thank you for all the support you've given to our center. I refer to it as our center because that's the way we referred to it in the beginning. You know, it was the old Salisbury Substance Abuse Community Center. It kind of got wordy, especially in situations like this. So, and a lot of people in the Salisbury area did not know the name of it. So we just started calling it Center for Expediency. I'd like to give special thanks to our table sponsors, APPI Energy, Avery Hall Insurance. Please, Avery Hall Insurance, stick your hand up there so you can see you. Thank you, guys. The Henson Foundation, the Hudson Services, and Pemberton Pharmacy. Where are you? I saw you come in here. Sure. Craig, where are you, Craig? I know you're here. I still can't see you, but anyway, hey, Craig. I'm sure you noticed the great student artwork around here and around the room today. And I'd like to call Pam Gregory up to give you a little heads up on what this is all about. And in fact, you can see it around the room if you haven't already seen it. Pam, where are you, Pam? Please, take that thing away from me.
I'm not sure I'm the one to give it to. Good morning.
Morning. Morning.
So around the room, you see just a few samples of the more than 75 pieces of student art that we were able to acquire this year in our third annual Lower Shore Substance Abuse Awareness Art Competition. Say that 5 times fast. This is made possible actually through some significant support from the Opioid Operations Command Center out of the Governor's Office, as well as our partners here with the Wycomico County Health Department, the Dorchester, Somerset, and Worcester Health Departments as well, along with the Wycomico Sheriff's and the Wycomico State's Attorney's Office. So we're very thankful for their support. They also helped in judging this year, which made it super awesome. But this is just a small sampling. We had students from both middle and high school in all 4 lower counties participate. And the only premise they were given was to just express themselves through art on their vision or how they have been affected or their perception of the addiction crisis. And it's really amazing and telling. So you'll see this art throughout the next year until we go into the spring for our next competition. So I asked 2 things. 1, look at it, appreciate it, and if you ever would like it to be on display at your event, whether that's a 1-day or a multi-day thing, just let me know. We're more than happy to have it out there. That's what it's for. And it's amazing the talent that these young people have. More talent than I have in my little pinky finger. So there you go. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if I introduced me. I'm Pat Basha. I'm the MC for the evening, you lucky devils. I wear a couple hats. One is this beautiful lady at the head table seating arrangement, my wife Connie. She actually keeps me around as her husband. And her father was my partner in making this thing happen over, when was it, 87, since 1987. So that's his daughter right there sitting next to Ed, my friend Ed, and the Colonel. Say hi, Connie. She's actually stuck it out for 46 years. 46 years, by the way. Looks pretty good, huh? Yeah. For me. Okay. Let's see. All right, bear with me. I just got the script this morning. And, you know, at my age of 47, your memory starts to fade. All you people that are 47 and over, I'm also an experienced liar. The other hat that I wear is I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've been sober for 31 years. Been a long haul. Been very involved in all this. And I've watched a lot of folks come and go. And our newest guy, where the heck is it? Curtis, where are you? Curtis. Curtis is the center's new executive director. I'm not sure he knows what he stepped into, but I'll turn the mic over to Curtis. Thank you, Curtis.
everybody. Good morning.
Good morning.
I want to thank everyone for coming. We really appreciate you showing up early and, to support us. It means a lot. It means a lot to the community. And, I just can't thank you enough. There are two people in particular that I'd like to thank. They just do so much for the center. The first would be Doug. Doug, are you in here? He's out front? Okay, well then we'll move to Tracy. Tracy did so much for this breakfast. She organized everything. She just sent out all the sponsorship letters, organized donations, wrote the program, wrote the scripts, invited everyone, just everything you can think of. She had her hands on, and it was just an amazing feat and so much to do. And this is the first year that she's had to do that, so she didn't have a lot to go off of. So it's just really amazing that it worked out the way it did. Tracy, would you mind coming up here? I'm sorry. Okay, Reverend Frida Malcolm? Hi, this is Reverend Frida Malcolm. She would like to bless the breakfast.
Good morning. Thank you for all the work you do. We are partners in the recovery process. St. Albans, if you don't know where it is, it's right across the street. Set back from the road, past the solar panels. And we actually host 8 12-step groups a week. And we're happy to do that. One of the groups I know has been meeting at least 35 years. So it's something that the congregation has supported for a long time before I arrived. We are trying something new this coming Sunday. We're having a recovery service, a worship service at 5 p.m. open to anybody, whether you're in the program or not in the program, but it is a service that is centered around the 12 steps. So I would invite you to that, and if you want to invite somebody else, that's fine too. We don't have any idea how many people are going to show up. But let us pray. Oh God, thank you for this day. Thank you for our lives, and thank you for the lives that are being saved by those who will reach out and give hope. We thank you for the food that you provide for us, and those who prepared it, and those who will clean up afterwards. And we ask you to bless this time, to bless the work that all of these folks do, and to bless those who struggle day by day. And this we pray in the name of the one who created us. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Reverend Malcolm. Okay, this is the moment I know I've been waiting for. It's time to eat. So if you could divide the room, there's 2 buffet tables, one to the right, one to the left, and enjoy. Thank you. Hello. Hi, can I have everyone's attention? Sorry to interrupt breakfast. I just need to thank the, who I was trying to thank before, when he was out in the hall, Doug. He does so much for us. Doug Wilson, he was the interim director when we didn't have anyone before I started, and he just kept everything going, kept momentum, and just I can't thank him enough. I know the board feels the same way. We got you something, Doug. You don't mind coming up here? Thanks, Doug. And last, I'd like to thank the Beth Olson. She is the last director before Doug took over. She was director for quite some time and kept everything going. Mostly, when I came in, I had no, I needed, the more knowledge, the better. So she had a lot of information for me. She's been very helpful. She answers the phone anytime I call. She comes over and meets with me to fill me in on just the administrative things that I need to know. And she's been extremely helpful. Beth, you're in here, right? Hi, Beth. Can you come up? Okay, that was it. Yep, thank you. Now over to Pat. Thanks, Pat.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Doug. Appreciate everything you guys have done, and in some cases continue to do for our center. I want to recognize a few other people before we move along, and these are folks who work for us on a day-to-day basis in some capacity or another, either at the state or the local level. We have a couple state senators here. Addie Eckert, I saw you come in here, Addie, so you can't hide from me. There you are. And I haven't seen Jim Mathias. Did he come in? There he is, right. Thanks, folks. I apologize, Jim. I was just told yesterday that my eyeballs are not quite working like they used to. So anyway, moving on, we've got, let's see, Mary Beth Carazzo, are you here? I thought I saw you. There you are. And we've got Judge Matt Maciarello. Matt. Sorry, Matt. And Kathleen Beck said, I know you're here. Johnny Mounts? No Johnny Mounts.
I'll be here in 10 minutes.
Okay, and of course, Councilman Johnny Cannon. John, where are you, buddy? So now you got a face that goes along with a name, and you know who to throw rocks at or kiss. Okay, down the road. We got to move along here. Doug reminds me that, sometimes we get off the track, and I'm really good at that because I like to run my mouth, as some of you know. And I'll try to stay back on course here. Before I turn this over to Joe Gass, Joe has some information for us that he wants to explain to you how well we are doing. I'd first like to recognize the staff. Our executive director, where'd he go? There he is back there. You've already met Curtis. And Tracy, you met Tracy already, I do believe. Tracy Gregory. Did I leave any? Okay. Betty Hartman. Where are you, Betty? I know you're here. Oh, there you are. Okay. And Sharon Sutton. Sharon, did Sharon get here today? No? She's working. Good for her. So anyway, those are people that our center cannot do without. They practically live their whole lives with us, and they do an amazing job. It's not for the money, I guarantee you. It's for the love of us and recovery. So thank you, folks. Anyway, I need to turn this over to Joe. Joe, please come on up here.
I'll be very brief. I'm serving as the president of the RRC right now. The person that was responsible for getting me involved in the RRC 20 plus years ago is this gentleman right here. And I really appreciate him bringing me on the board. I've seen the results of what the center does, and it's phenomenal. I want to tell you a little bit about the center briefly, because we have two really great speakers coming up here, so I want you to hear them versus me. First of all, we had a bittersweet year. Beth Olson left us, and she did a tremendous job for the center. She rebranded us and did a lot for making awareness in our community. And we really thank Beth for everything she did for us. We found ourselves in a financial difficulty along the year, and we were $30,000 in deficit on our July 31st year end. So the board went to work, and really Doug did a great job. He served as interim director and turned it around for us. And in the meantime, we were able to find Curtis Paul, who's phenomenal. I want to thank Doug so much, because for him to step in and serve full-time as an executive director took a tremendous amount of time and effort, and we really appreciate that. Tracy Gregory is our office manager, and she's done a tremendous job for us too. And I do want to point out Lou Carmen here, who really served as our manager for many, many years, and I'm so happy that he's here with us today. One last thing, I'd like the board to please stand up. Most of them are wearing these color shirts, so if you could please stand up and be recognized. Thank you so much. And with Curtis Paul leading the way, we look for great things in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Joe. And when I recruited Joe, or I say when we recruited Joe, the first thing he asked is, what am I getting into? Well, he's still around, so and he's done a great job. Anyway, I'd like to bring up Andre Henry. Andre is going to share his journey, a mess to a miracle. Andre was born in Salisbury and raised in Wilmington. He moved back to Salisbury in the early 90s, but brought the mean streets of Wilmington and his addiction back with him. He surrendered to his addiction in 1999 at the Johnny O Center, which is one of the original names of our center. We kept, not as well as Beth, we kept rebranding until we got it right. We called it the Johnny O Center because Johnny O'Keefe was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. He died. When he died, he was about 42, 43 years sober, I think. He worked for Delmarva Power's original company, what was that? I can't remember the name of it now, but it was so long ago, back in the 50s. I wasn't alive back then. My mother was still thinking about me. See? I'm back at it again. I'm sorry, camera. Anyway, he brought the mean streets of Wilmington and his addiction back with him. He surrendered to his addiction in 1999 at the Johnny O's, the old SSACC building, and completed treatment at the Hudson Center. In 2000, he became a Hudson employee for 13 years. Unfortunately, after 16 years of sobriety, he suffered a relapse, which ended in incarceration. Thankfully, he surrendered once again in 2016 and has been sober and active member of the recovery community. We are so honored to have Andre here to share his message and recovery and hope. Andre.
Woo! Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Lighten up recovery, right? I'm actually excited. I'm excited to be here, man. And I want to first start off by saying good morning, everybody, and to all the respective members in the audience, the community, leaders, local and state organizations. I want to first off thank you for having me and allowing me to be a part of this beautiful day. Because it was not too long ago, I might not have been welcome in an event of this stature. And so for that, I'm grateful. And I also want to thank you for allowing me to share a portion of myself with you all. Just a small portion, a fraction. Because see, They told me I had to write this down, and I got 10 minutes. And it's hard to cram a lifetime in 10 minutes. And if I had time, I would tell you guys what a mess is. Because my dad used to tell me a long time ago, boy, you is a mess. And he proceeded to tell me, trying to stuff 20 pounds in a 10-pound bag. Some of y'all caught that. All right. Anyway, I'm Andre. Introducing myself. I'm Andre. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and, because this isn't the same type of setting, I'm going to give you my full name. That way, so the community will know me, and if anything ever happens to me, you'll know who to ask for. Because you can go and you can ask for Andre, but it could be a million Andres. I'm Andre Henry, a grateful recovering addict. A grateful recovering addict. And I do emphasize the part grateful. And I say that because life wasn't always like that for this guy standing before you. My message today is one that I want to say conveys is entitled, From a Mess to a Miracle. So, I took some time to look up, Google that is, Webster's, what is a mess? And it says in Webster's, in the Google definition, it says a mess is a situation or a state of affairs that is confused or full of difficulties. Maybe not everyone in this room, but a few of us, I was in a mess. I was in difficulties. My life had become, as they say, a quagmire. So, you know, I'm ad-libbing, and when I say my life had become full of difficulties, that starts with jails, institutions, therapy, a life of crime. I came from a hellish environment, if I could use that word. And it started for me at the age of 14 in the mean streets of Wilmington, Delaware. So when you become deemed by the state a juvenile delinquent, you spend plenty of time in juvenile facilities. You know, and they start to send you to programs like, you know, they got a TV show about it now. But I probably was one of the first candidates in the state of Delaware at the age 14 who they sent down to Smyrna prison for the Scared Straight program. And then after that, when that didn't do it, the governor at that time, they had a project, and it was called the Governor Bacon Project. And I didn't go to school with everyone else. They sent me to a juvenile delinquency school down in Delaware City, which, if anyone knows anything about Delaware, Delaware City was where they used to house, it's where the psychiatric ward was at. And they housed our school on the psychiatric ward. So when I walked the campus as a juvenile to go from class to class, we seen everyone that was in the psych ward on the other side of us. It's a message in that. It's a message in that. If I didn't get my life right, I was going to be on the other side of that fence. So, it wasn't until around 1999 when life had ran its course for me, and that is when I first surrendered to the disease and that ugly lifestyle. And as we say in our literature, I was caught in a vicious cycle. When you think of the word vicious, I want you to think of that, a vicious cycle. You know, I was listening to the news last night, right? And the statistics for Wacomico County, if I'm quoting it right, we've had 82 or 84 overdoses and 18 deaths, and we're only in month 9 for the year. So that tells us we've had 2 deaths each month so far. So there was a guy playing in the band earlier too. As I was saying hello to everyone, I wanted to thank this guy. If he's still in the audience, he probably don't mind me saying his name. It's a guy named Mr. Dick Morris, who's a good friend of mine. And he's been well established and a big help in his community. Matter of fact, he was such a good friend, in the year 1999, he fired me. We can laugh about that. But the beautiful thing about it is, yes sir, there he is, there's Dick. The beautiful thing, Dick Morris. The beautiful thing about it is that he cared enough for me that when he fired me, that's the first man that ever sent me to treatment. I had never been to treatment before. He paid for my treatment. He told me, you get your life together. And we've been friends ever since. I stop by his place of business every now and then to let him know how I'm doing and everything. But yeah, that's a good guy there, guys. It's a good guy. It's the whole family. So like I said, it wasn't until 1999 that I ended up getting myself together. And I remember after leaving treatment, first place I went to was a place called Johnny O's. And there was and my first warm welcome there was a little small petite lady who wore a big red updo. Some of y'all laughing because I think you know who that is. But anyway, I affectionately and warmly call her Miss Dee Dee today. And the hug that she gave me upon walking in that building was a warm welcome and a hug that I would never forget. And with that giggly laugh she said, welcome, you're home, you're home. And you know, as Pat said, you know, we've grown in this community. You know, we started out at the Johnny O's building, then we moved to the SSAC community, and now we are the Recovery Resource Center. So, but anyway, to me, Miss Dee Dee didn't know how much that hug meant to me at that time. And yes, as I stated, I've been around here for a while because I just went through 3 names of 3 different community clubhouses, as we call them. You know, Johnny O's, I got a lot of memories there. The SAC, Recovery Resource Center. You guys in this recovery community for some years now is where I've called home. To be exact, I've been here with you guys so long that today, believe it or not, September 27th, if things had went the way I thought, not the way it was planned, but if I thought, today I would have been celebrating 6,935 days of sobriety. But that's 19 years to be exact. But this disease is powerful. It's a very powerful disease. After 16 years of clean time and recovery, yes, I relapsed. This is why in the beginning I stated that I'm grateful, because it's been a tumultuous road to fight my way back. But here I stand. Like the great Maya Angelou said, here I stand. Here I stand. Here I stand. Yes. So, but anyway, let me tell you about the community at the Recovery Resource Center. They never gave up on me, guys. From Miss Betty's gracious smile, where you at, Miss Betty? Hey, baby, how you doing? To my lady, I call her Mother Love every now and then, Miss Beth Olson back there. I mean, they never gave up on me, guys, from whether it was from a phone call to sending someone to look for me, or just even when I came back, they welcomed me back with open arms. And Miss Tracy. Miss Tracy with her vibrant spirit. We didn't know each other as well back then, but she always, you know, had this vibrant attitude and smile, and she always welcomed me in. And I think she seen me struggling in the beginning, but she kept welcoming. She kept greeting me and kept telling me, you know, keep coming back. Don't leave us. Don't leave us. Don't leave us. So anyway, I'm proud to report today that I stand before you guys with 948 days consecutive in a row. And we're back on the path where we need to be at. See, I don't count in years anymore, guys. I don't count in years anymore. I count in days. Because, see, each day is a gift. A gift to live the miracle. Because that's what I'm living in now. I'm living in the miracle. And me and Judge Bex there, we normally have some conversations every now and then. Probably used to be once a week, but every now and then now it's down to like twice a month, once a month. And I always remind her, just like we eating this beautiful breakfast right now, right? Not too long ago, I was living at Wacamaco's finest hotel. and they fed me the cuisine that you would not believe. I had the most beautiful brown tray that you could ever imagine. And when I think of that brown tray, like even right now, it still brings chills and shivers to my body. I don't want to see no more brown trays, guys. I'm living a miracle. I'm living the dream right now. But it's also because of this community. You know, they've stood behind me, they've pushed me, they've loved me, they loved on me. So, anyway, as one of my friends would say, man, I never had it so good. I really haven't. I've never had it so good. So, see, through my community and you guys help at the Resource Center, I grew through the years in spite of myself. I've worked at several treatment facilities throughout the state. I've carried the message of hope to jails, hospitals, and institutions. I've even ran transitional houses. I've gone back to school, college that is. I've been afforded, because of this life, of changing my life, been able to raise 2 children who are both in college seeking their degrees right now. One is at Howard University, and the other one is at Morgan State. I've become an advocate for treatment and punishment. I've become an advocate for treatment over punishment. That's what I meant to say. And an advocate for overdose awareness and for felon reentry. I remember my first meeting back after a relapse, and I was feeling lost and down on myself. And a young lady started to read out of one of the meditation books that we had in the meeting. And for that day, it was entitled, Where the Happy People Meet. From that point on, I knew I was back home. I was safe. I was right where I belong. I was back on my trek, my journey from a mess to a miracle. Thank you.
I want to thank Andre for his speech there, and I'm sure there's more than one person in this room that can relate to Andre. When we built this center, our first one, our only, excuse me, I got a draining sinuses. I know you didn't need to hear that after breakfast, but you got to remember where it's coming from, okay? And maybe Doug won't ask me back here next year.
I already made that decision.
Oh, yeah, good. Y'all heard that now, didn't you? Didn't y'all hear that? Okay. Anyway, our purpose in life, as far as the center goes, was we wanted to save one life. We did that. I'm proud to say. I'm sorry, guys. Anyway, the next thing we wanted to do was return that life back to the community. We did that. Your proof is in front of you, around you. So, anyway, I can gratefully report to you now and today that there's a lot more of us that are sober out there, simply because that center was there when that needed to be there. You know, and I look around when I go to meetings, and I remember when I first came around, I remember the old timers. And the old timers were, 60, 70, 80 years old, still carrying the message and helping people, get back up on their feet. This isn't something you learn off of a blackboard. This isn't something you learn out of a book. This is what we call, one-on-one kind of stuff that goes on every day in our center, every day. Now I'm almost ashamed to admit that now they call me the old timer. Matter of fact, I had 3 people say that when the old timer Pat over there said blah blah blah, and they go on, and not only do they, when new people come in there, the new people say, yeah, that new, old guy, Pat, over there, you know, the old timer. For some reason, they found, I all of a sudden, almost, it seems like overnight, went from Pat, the new guy on the street, to Pat, the old guy, and a mentor. And just to give you an example how that works, I sponsor a few people. And one of them is a young fella who I made him, I shouldn't say, I wrote his you-know-what to make sure he graduated from Salisbury State. And he got married a beautiful girl. They had 2 children, and I think they're like 2 and 4 now. And built a beautiful house. He's got a great job in the community. And I tell, and we work at one of the local addiction centers on Thursday nights, helping new people in an outpatient program. Well, I remind him, and I remind the crowd that happens to be there that night going to this meeting, that his name is Louis. And I said, you know, when I found Louis, I really expected him to be floating face down in the Wycomico River. He was a drug addict, and he liked to drink booze too, on top of his drugs. So finding him, you know, face down in the Wycomico River wasn't a far stretch. Well, he got up and left that meeting one night and jumped in his car where he already had a blunt. I know not all of you know what a blunt is, but anyway, he had a blunt already rolled in the car. He was going to go over to Market Street Inn because there was a band playing there, and he changed his mind. He said, "This is whatever night, college night is over Frank Hanna's place on the river." He said that all the guys were going to be there at Frank's place. So he smoked the blunt, on the way over. It's a long trip from there by Market Street all the way across the river, you know. But he smoked the whole thing and drank 2 beers, you know. And then he disappeared on me again. And he was working in Ocean City. He had to be there at 6 o'clock every morning to start. He cooked breakfast for his uncle. He got there one morning and he felt like a lot of us have over the years. At one point in time, he just become sick and tired of being sick and tired. The bottom line was this: he made up his mind 2 years later to come back to that center. And he walked in that door of that center that night. You know, and he came over and shook my hand. He said, "I'm back." You know, with him. Sorry. It's very emotional stuff. It's very emotional stuff for me, and I apologize for that. Yeah. If you thought you heard what you thought you heard, it's your imagination working very hard. Anyway, I became once again Louis' sponsor, and we worked very hard on the steps. We went to a lot of meetings together. Louis got married. He married his college sweetheart. They started with 2 kids. Louis got a great job. Louis got an even better job, and he climbed the ladder so fast. I was worried that he was becoming too famous too fast. And you know, growth, that kind of growth can be dangerous sometimes to us. So anyway, Louis got a phone call at work one morning, and his wife said, "I'm packed, I'm leaving, I'm taking the kids." And, you know, the oldest child at that time was 3 years old. And the first thing he did was exactly what I told him to do, that was told to me to do. When the you-know-what hits the fan, and you don't think you can handle it, if you're worried about whether you're going to drink or drug, call somebody. Call somebody that's in the program. And Louis called me and told me that. And I said, "Well, come on, I'll meet you over at the center." And he's back. He's now 5 years sober. He's raising his kids half the time. He's still got the great job. I expect Louis to be even bigger and better things. I admire him for, you know, getting through that, what's going to be a divorce, and not drinking and not drugging. And, you know, and Louis kind of glued at my hip. You know, we became very good friends over the years. And I'm proud to say he works with me in that center that we work on Thursday nights. And that's what he thinks probably saved his life. That I dragged him in there one night to share his story with the group. And he said, "Something hit me that night sitting in that chair." We know what it was. You, us. And now Louis sponsors people. That's how it works. You know, we keep carrying the message, and to anybody that wants it. We don't carry the message to everybody that needs it, because they don't know they need it. They just want it because it may be the thing to do. People who are struggling to get sober or whatever, find a way through our program and other programs around here. We don't have a lock on sobriety. We get out there and we all of a sudden get sort of well. We don't ever get real well. That's a danger sign, because then we get too comfortable in what we're doing. We need to be vigilant, 24/7. So, sorry about that. I didn't mean to get off on it. You guys got to hold up a sign or something. Stop. Shut up for a minute, will you? And I don't care if it's done in crayon. Just, whatever. Anyway, I would like to now bring up. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I skipped this one. I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Miss Susan Broderick. Susan's an attorney and her professional life is centered on the justice systems. Her personal life has been a journey which she has experienced firsthand. Most of the topics she now works on. Her experience is growing up in a family where alcoholism was present, and her own struggle with alcohol gives her a unique insight into the issues that many other experts have only studied. Susan's expertise and wisdom are unique and multifaceted. She has a perspective that gives her tremendous credibility when she speaks and allows her to continue to bring a message of hope to those in the justice systems. In academia and with the millions of people whose lives have been affected by addiction. Sorry about that. Okay. Anyway, please, if you would help me and welcome Susan Broderick. Go fingernail.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. It is absolutely amazing to be with you this morning. And to start it out, I will introduce myself. My name is Susan Broderick. I am a woman in long-term recovery. For me, that means I have not had a drink since July 15, 2001. And what I'd like to do today is just to tell you a little bit of what it was like, what happened, and most importantly, what it's like now. So I grew up from, I don't know if you can tell, but I am a New Yorker. You'll hear it like when I say coffee. But I grew up in an Irish Catholic family, a lot of alcoholism. Both my grandfathers died from this disease, both my parents were alcoholics. My father was a construction worker, and I can still remember on Fridays, it was always hit or miss whether or not that car was going to be in the driveway. And if it wasn't in the driveway, that meant he was out drinking. And it used to create such anxiety in my stomach because this was around the time of the Brady Bunch, for those who, and Mike Brady didn't drink on Friday nights. And so there was a lot of shame associated with my father's drinking. And then inevitably, he would get home at around 2 o'clock in the morning and fight with my mother. And so from a very young age, I hated alcohol. And I hated what it did to my parents. And then lo and behold, I was around 14, 15 years old, and my friends started drinking. And I started drinking. And I immediately loved it. And in fact, my nickname in high school was the Sponge. And now I look back and I'm like, well, that should have been one of the questions on like the 20 question thing, do you have a problem with alcohol? And I just loved to drink. Now, the other thing that I have to mention is there was a shining light in my childhood, and that was my grandmother. My grandmother was one of the few non-alcoholics in the family, and she was also a woman way ahead of her time. She had been a single mom. She raised my dad and his brother and sister. She got involved in politics. She used to bring me down to Washington, D.C. when I was little. And from an early age, I was like, I just want to grow up and be a lawyer in Washington, D.C. And she was like, you can do it. You can do anything you put your mind to, Susan. And when you look at my family, my father hadn't even graduated high school. He had a GED. So we didn't come from a long line of attorneys. But she was just like, yep, you can do it. And so I went to college. Well, actually, my drinking in high school, everything turned to revolve around partying and my friends. And, that happens a lot during the teenage years. And then I went to college, and that was crazy. And actually, some of the worst parts of my drinking happened in college. I had transferred to the University of Albany when I knew that I was at Cortland originally, and we were drinking so much, I was like, I'm never going to become a lawyer if I stay here. So I transferred over to Albany. Problem is, I was still at Albany. My drinking followed me to Albany, and shortly after I transferred, I was at a party and passed out, blacked out, and woke up, and all I can remember now is that there were a bunch of guys, and I kind of went back into the blackout. And when I woke up the next day, it was at some big fraternity house, and I just remember going into the bathroom, and they had cut my hair. They cut the front of my hair. And, you know, I look back at that, and it's like, oh my God, like that should have been the bottom. But in fact, I drank more after that. And at that time, there was no collegiate recovery. Nobody talked about getting sober. And I knew there was an issue that I had with alcohol. But I couldn't imagine life without it. And so the good thing is that I still could get good grades. And I ended up getting a 4.0 that semester that I was attacked. And I didn't talk to anybody about the attack. And I was fortunate enough, I went to law school, and in law school is when my nightly drinking started. Because it was like, oh, well, after a tough day of studying, I need to take the edge off. So I graduated law school, and I got a job at the Manhattan DA's office. Best job ever. But, of course, and this is what I always did, I gravitated to the people that like to play hard. You know, so it was that work hard, play hard environment, and I did both very well. At least I think I did. And the thing is, I didn't drink during the day. I didn't drink in the office. But I can tell you, I can remember days sitting in a courtroom on trial or, you know, for arraignments or things and thinking, I can't wait to get home to my Chardonnay and my cigarettes. And during those years, you know, it was this camaraderie and, you know, and sometimes we were very inappropriate with each other and with colleagues and things. And I look back now at some of the things that happened then, and it's crazy. But, and it really did take a toll on my reputation in terms of the things I would do when I was drinking were not the things I would ever do as a sober woman. And then more and more my friends started, you know, settling down and getting married, and I'm like, oh, I'm not settling down, you know, I'm a career woman. And the truth is I was a drunk who couldn't sustain a relationship. You know, I would go out on dates, and then after about 2 or 3 dates, it was very clear to them that there was something up. So the calls would stop. But that wouldn't stop me from calling them, which I tended to do a lot after I was drinking. I'd just pick up the phone, call an ex-boyfriend, you know, I'd just go down the list. They'd be on the other end like, how did I let this one get away? She's such a treat. So it was my life. And I was just like, well, this is who I am, you know, and it's, how pathetic. So what happened is in January of 2001, I was getting ready for a wedding for one of my colleagues from the DA's office. And I knew that there were going to be a lot of very important people at this party. There were going to be a lot of judges and people that had worked in the office and gone on to higher public office. And I just remember being in the shower that day and becoming petrified. Because I knew that once I went to that cocktail hour, I knew once I had that first glass of wine, something started inside of me that I could not stop. And I just remember thinking, and it was that first moment that I truly realized I really was powerless over alcohol. And I kept thinking, I'm gonna go there, I'm gonna make a fool out of myself. And I did. I went to the wedding, I behaved completely inappropriately, went home with one of my colleagues, and the next day I got an email. And it was from the woman who had been in the DA's office with me and had become a judge. She was my mentor. And all the email said was, Susan, I think you have a problem with alcohol. And I hit delete because I was like, this is not acceptable. So a couple of months later, but it was good because it really was the beginning of me finally trying to contemplate how I would ever live my life without alcohol. everything revolved around alcohol. So a couple of months later, I was down in North Carolina. My parents had retired to North Carolina, and both my parents had become sober. And I was watching television with my father, and out of the blue, he just said, you know, you gotta stop drinking. And I'm like, I'm not drunk right now. And he said, I'm not talking about right now. He's like, nobody in our family should drink. And I just remember coming home from there thinking, he knows my secret. And it really wasn't a secret. You know, I remember him saying later that, you know, my phone calls at night, they would sometimes dread them because, you know, I'd be slurring my words and they could hear the ice in the class. And so in July of 2001, I went down to Washington, D.C. It was the week of July 2nd, and I was going down for a conference at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So and professionally, actually, things were going really, really well. I handled sex crimes cases, domestic violence cases, homicide cases. It was actually after a big homicide case that Mr. Morgenthau had called me into his office and said, congratulations on that conviction, I'm gonna put you in charge of child abuse. And I was like, that's a promotion? and I found my next 3 years as the Deputy Bureau Chief of Child Abuse were actually 3 of the most important years of my career. Working with children was incredible. But again, it was sort of fueling that denial that I had to stop, because it's like, well, look, I'm getting promotions at the Manhattan DA's office, and then I'd say, well, I haven't gotten a DWI, but I didn't have a car, so that excuse fell flat. And so in July, I was down in DC, and I was at this great conference, and here I am in the city that I had always dreamed of. And all I wanted to do every night was go back to my hotel room, to the Chardonnay and the cigarettes. And I remember thinking, this is not who you dreamed of becoming as a little girl. And that Saturday was July 14th, and it was my father's birthday. So I called him before I left DC, and I had planned on doing sightseeing in DC before I took my flight. Of course, I was hungover, so I didn't get to do things I had planned to do. I called my father for his birthday, flew back to New York. First thing I did was go straight to the liquor store, because they're closed on Sundays, and you always have to have your stash of Chardonnay, at least if you're me. And went back to my apartment and started calling old boyfriends again. And that night, there was an old boyfriend. He must have been just as drunk as I was, because he came over. I don't remember much of the evening. I do remember that evidently he said that I was going on and on about, I've got to do something about my drinking. And then he stayed over, and the next day I remember he was leaving, and he said, I'll call you later. And I just remember thinking, he's not going to call me later. They never call me later. And he called me later. And he said to me, he hadn't seen me in 2 years. And he said, Susan, when I walked into your apartment last night, all I could think is, she used to be pretty. And I've never been gut punched before, but that was like the closest thing. You know, and it's a little embarrassing to say that was my bottom, and it really was like vanity that led me into AA, but it was a long time coming, and that was really just the straw that broke the camel's back. But so that day, I decided, I looked up online, and I found a meeting, and I went to a meeting, and I remember it was on the Upper East Side of New York, and I sat in the front. I didn't know what I was doing, and I was crying hysterically. And I raised my hand when they asked if there were any new people, and I said, my name is Susan, and I'm an alcoholic. And I felt like 10,000 tons were off my shoulder, because I was finally telling the truth. And it was something I knew intrinsically, but I had never wanted to admit. And the relief that came from that was unbelievable. And I walked out of the church that night, and I was crying, and I called my father. And he's like, what's the matter? And I said, I just went to an AA meeting. And he said, you don't have to give me another birthday present for the rest of my life. And I said, well, they told me I have to do 90 meetings in 90 days. I thought their mantra was 1 day at a time, and I don't know. And so he's like, well, I'll count the days with you. And he did. And that Friday, I went to a meeting, and it was in downtown Brooklyn. And they introduced the speaker, and they were like, and Charlie started his road to recovery in the Brooklyn House of Detention. And I'm like, oh dear God, I might have put Charlie there, and I don't want to be here right now. This is a little embarrassing. And Charlie got up and told his story, and very much like Andre's, I was sitting there and crying at the end of it. And I remember it was a Friday night, and I went up to him afterwards, and I said, you're a defendant, I'm a prosecutor, and we are the same. And we were hit with the same disease. And, you know, I did the 90 meetings in 90 days, and on my 57th day was September 11th, 2001. And I lived in Brooklyn Heights, and I was on I saw the towers on fire. That afternoon, I went down to the promenade in Brooklyn, which is right across from downtown Manhattan. And the smoke was coming over, and the stench and the papers. It was awful, and we all know how awful it was. And I just remember I was sitting on the bench and crying, and I looked up, and I'm like, God, you lost me. And a few minutes later, I hear Susan, and I look up, and it was a woman from AA. And she said, I just checked with the church, and it's going to be open tonight at 7 o'clock. And I said, I'll be there. And she walked away, and I'm like, I'm back. So it was good. It was like, and the truth is, and that experience really was pivotal in my recovery, because I really did think about, like, what the hell would a drink do now? The only thing it would do is take away my 57 days of sobriety. And I've never had that. I've never had, since I was 15, I never went 57 days sober. And then it kind of became like a thing between me and the terrorists, but sometimes you need that fight, I was like, I'm not giving them my 57 days. That was my patriotic, duty. So, and I talk about the fact that, I got sober, and then all the you-know-what hit the fan, because a year later, 4th of July weekend, 2002, I was on trial with a homicide case, a little girl who had been starved to death. And that weekend I came home, and I had a big bunch of files with me. And evidently my front door didn't close all the way. 'Cause about 6:15 in the morning, I felt something touching my chest. And I looked up, and there was a strange man standing in my apartment. And I screamed, get that whatever out, and he got out, and then it was crazy, because there was a beer bottle in the living room. So the poor cops that responded, I'm like, swab that for DNA, do this, I'm like leading the investigation into my own crime. But it came back, and it's a whole other story, but the DNA that was on that came back to an unsolved rape homicide. And, people talk about the fact that this disease, disorder, whatever you want to call addiction, that it'll eventually kill you. And I always said, well, it's not going to kill me. I drink, and I'll just live a depressing life and call my old boyfriends, but I'm not going to die from that. Maybe die from embarrassment. But I realized that night, had I been passed out, had I not been able to respond the way I did, I would have been killed that night. So again, and that's what recovery has brought me, is that whole opportunity to look at a set of facts and find the good, because there's always good. My father was, he had emphysema, so in 2005, he was very close to his death, and I remember thinking, well, when he dies, I'll drink, because there's probably a dispensation. Like when you lose a family member, you get a day to drink, and then you get back on the wagon or whatever. And right before my father died, my mother had been diagnosed with inflammatory breast cancer. So it was horrible, but it also provided me an opportunity to be the daughter that I wasn't as a teenager. And I was able to be there for both of my parents. And in fact, the night that my father passed, my mother couldn't stay at the hospital because she was going through chemo. And my father passed at 5:15 in the morning, and I was holding his hand. And I can tell you right now, if I had been drinking, I would have left that hospital at 11 o'clock at night so I could go home to my Chardonnay and my cigarettes and try to deal with my father's passing. And instead, I got to be with him the moment he took his last breath. And to me, that is so far the greatest gift of my sobriety. And then the following year, my mother was, she had her surgery. And then in 2007, I found out that I had breast cancer. So I, went for, and it was stage 1, it was early, had a lumpectomy, did radiation. The following year, the man that I was dating through AA was diagnosed with cancer, and he died 6 months later. And again, it was the AA community carried me through each and everything that I went through, and they were always there. And in 2009, I discovered something on my breast, and I went to 4 different doctors. And they were like, oh, it's nothing, you're fine. And the last one said, it's probably scar tissue. And I said, you know what, I'm not a doctor, but probably is not a medical diagnosis that I'm comfortable with, so let's go for the biopsy. And he went for the biopsy, and it came back that it was in fact cancer. And, that night I was not jumping for joy. I was not seeing rainbows and unicorns. I was like, what did I do to make God so mean to me right now? And I called my sponsor, and she said, once again, I think the stars are aligned for you. And I was like, well, you're going to have to explain it because I'm not seeing it. And both times with the cancer, even the first time they told me there was nothing wrong and I pushed for more tests. And the second time, if I had listened to it's probably scar tissue, I probably wouldn't be here today. So she said to me, she said, how many people can say that they've saved their life 2 times? I'm like, well, when you put it that way, it really is great. And again, that is what recovery is. It's that whole perspective change. It's looking at things from a positive outlook, because there always is something good in a situation. And each and every one of these difficult situations that I went through, I look back at them as they really were blessings in my life. Because every time I encountered something that I thought was so awful, so horrible, I got through it. And I got through it without a drink. I mean, I used to need 4 glasses of wine to go out on a date. And now I was getting through like September 11th, my father dying, all these things, stone cold sober. And it was the best feeling in the world. Because it was finally that feeling like, you know what, this is the woman I dreamed of being. And sobriety has made me, has brought so many things to my life. And so I forgot this part, I did follow my dreams as well and moved to DC in 2003. And I was working for the National DA's Association doing child abuse work. Then I was the director of the juvenile justice programming. And then in 2008, I went over and I've spent the last 10 years at Georgetown University. I was doing juvenile justice work with prosecutors and judges all over the country. The last probably 4 years, I've really been gravitating more towards recovery and the justice system. And I feel like in many ways my professional and personal lives have really collided, and in a wonderful way. Back in 2013, I was at a meeting in Colorado with a group of prosecutors, and they were telling me about a program that they were working with in their drug court and in probation, and it was called Phoenix Multisport. I'm like, well, what is it? And they said, well, it was started by this guy, Scott. He got sober up in Boston. He was 24, came out of treatment, and he was like, what the heck am I going to do in my free time? So he started boxing, he started cycling, and he found that doing all of these activities not only helped him stay sober, not only helped him get healthier, but really helped change his identity going from an addict to an athlete. So he moved out to Colorado and just started asking people from 12-step meetings to go and do like hiking and doing all these great things. There was such support around this that he eventually created a nonprofit, and he called it Phoenix Multisport. And I'm like, this is brilliant. And I still remember sitting in the room texting my friends in New York. I'm like, we got to bring this all over the country. This is the most amazing thing. And it's that whole idea of using the leverage of the justice system to help point people in a positive way. Because I've never met anybody who decided to get sober or decided to get clean because things were going good. It's always a result of a consequence. And very often that consequence is an arrest or a referral to the justice system. And that's why what I'm trying to do now is to work with anybody who will talk to me in the justice system about finding ways to use that leverage in a way that we can hold people accountable, keep public safety as a priority as well, but then also use that leverage to help somebody get sober. Because that's good for public safety, that's good for the community, that's good for them, and it's good for their families, and it's good for everyone. So after I had heard about Phoenix, about a year later, I met with Scott, and next thing you know, I'm on the board. Now I'm the chair of the board, and this is not a promotion for Phoenix, I swear to God, it's just, this is how my life has unfolded. And so Scott and I have been talking about this whole idea of Phoenix inside and out. And originally it was, inside and out of the justice system. So we're working at diversion, working at drug court level, probation, but then also the hope is to be able to go inside facilities and start working with people while they're still on the inside. And we're actually doing this up in Boise. There's a women's prison, because now Phoenix is expanding all over the country. There's a women's prison there, and our members went in, spoke to the warden and said, we'd like to come in and bring yoga and other types of programming. So we're still working on the paperwork, but already, because they've met with the women, and women are already coming out and going right to Phoenix, because there they have a supportive community, a network of positive peers who are sober, they have the exercise, they have a sense of hope. And hope is used a lot in recovery because it honestly conveys that instrumental part. People need to believe that things are going to get better if they're going to stay sober. And that's part of it. It's like the initiation to sobriety, again, is very often because of a consequence or something bad. But if we're going to sustain our recovery, we need to fill that void. We need to, we take drugs and alcohol out of the picture, well, something else has to go in there. And when we start finding these activities that give us hope and joy and a feeling of meaning and purpose and a feeling that we're living the lives we were meant to live, then we stay sober. And I think the title for my talk today was The Reality of Recovery, because I feel like today especially, we hear about the overdoses, we hear about the addiction rates. We don't hear enough about the reality of recovery. The reality is that of all the disorders, the prognosis for addiction is actually very good. The majority of people who seek help for their addiction issues do recover. Maybe not immediately, sometimes there are relapses, but the majority of people who try to get sober do get sober. I'm currently working with a professor from the UK, and I came across his work last year. I was writing a paper called Love, Hope, and Random Drug Testing, because I was kind of pushing back a little bit on a lot of the people who were like, well, this is a disease, we can't arrest people for a disease, and I'm like, well, it's a little different than other diseases. Take it from me. I've had breast cancer and I've had alcoholism. My breast cancer didn't make me do the things my alcoholism did, and I did things that violated the law. I drove drunk, not in New York City, but on Long Island. But I did a lot of things, and there is a correlation between addiction and the justice system. So we cannot use addiction or the disease of addiction as a get-out-of-jail-free card, because it's not. And people have to be held responsible if they hurt other people because of their addiction. However, the fact remains that if we're not positive with them, we have that opportunity to point their life in a positive way. So when I was doing my research, I came across the work of a criminologist from the UK, and his name is David Best. And all he studies is the criminal justice system and recovery from addiction. And he has some amazing findings, and I'm happy to share them with your court people that are here today. But one of the most powerful studies of his was, it was called the Second Chance Study. And it was a group of offenders who had pretty significant offending histories and had addiction issues as well. And the result of that study was that these people went higher than the control group, the people that didn't have those issues. And he talked about post-traumatic growth. And it's that whole idea that the adversities actually give people more strength, and you have more than you think you do. It's not, oh, look at what I've been through. It's like, look what I've gotten through. Look at what I have survived through. And he talks about the fact that With most other diseases or disorders, the goal is to get you back to where you were when you first came into the doctor's office. With recovery, you get better than well. You get to live the life that you were supposed to live. And you know, I remember reading that study, and I got chills reading it, because I'm like, this is exactly what happened. And it's so true, and that's where, like, there's something so powerful just in sharing our stories, because if we've been through it, you know, and it was the same thing when I had breast cancer. I didn't want to talk to the doctors. I didn't want to talk to the radiologist. I wanted to talk to other women who were on the other side of it, who could show me they got through it, they were doing okay, and that's how I got through it. And that's the exact same thing that my recovery did for me. So I made the big decision this year to follow my heart, and I left Georgetown, which my mother's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm following my heart again. She was nervous in 2003 when I'm like, I have to move to DC. She's like, why? I'm like, it was my dream since I was a little girl. She's like, you don't know anybody there. I'm like, it'll be fine. So this year, I decided that, so I created Building Bridges to Recovery. And it's in honor of my father, because he was an iron worker and he built bridges in New York City. And my goal is to bring hope to the justice system, because I truly believe that the justice system plays one of the most major roles in addressing this, and that the justice system can provide more recovery, more hope to people, and to realize that this is nothing to be ashamed of, and that recovery, the decision I made on July 15th, 2001, to this day, is the best decision I have ever made in my life. And if there's anybody new in this room, or anybody who is feeling a little despondent, just stay in the middle of it, keep going. It's easier to stay sober than to get sober. And the woman that was the speaker at my first meeting, her name was Claire, and she was celebrating 25 years of sobriety. And I'm sitting in the front crying, and she talked about a life beyond her wildest dreams. And I was sitting here this morning, and I'm like, it's true. I mean, the fact that I am here today and I can share my story with you and help you in any way that I can, it's a gift. And it just confirms to me that this is what I'm supposed to be doing now, and this is my purpose. And so thank you for having me here today. And I want to help anybody that I can, and help make sure that we're doing what we can in the justice system to turn lives around in a really positive way, and support those families as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Susan, for your, we used to call them drunkalogs. I say we used to, some of the old timers still call them that. But anyway, and there I go with the old timer story again. But we also get to hear those kinds of stories every day in AA meetings. You know, and that's the reason why we encourage that, is because somebody out there who's suffering may pick up a twinge of hope. And, you know, and we always say in meetings, when we do share like that, you never know who's listening. And, you know, that's one of the amazing things. And I had that, a big case like that happened to me one time. I was working at this rehab, as running an outpatient program at night. And I don't know, 5 years or so later, I'm in the hardware, Ace Hardware over there by the high school. And there's a guy, spring day or whatever, and the doors are open. And there's a guy it was an Ace Hardware. And there's a guy standing at the door with an Ace business manager's shirt on. And, you know, he's looking at me. And I'm thinking, why is that guy looking at me? I mean, he just kept staring at me. And I'm thinking, and he's at the door. He's waiting for me to leave because he probably thinks I've shoplifted something. Alcoholic thinking. But anyway, I go out the door, and he says, "You don't remember me, do you?" And I said, "No, I'm sorry, I don't." He says, "I heard you speak 5 years ago at an outpatient program in Salisbury." And he said, "You said something that night that changed my life." Happens all the time. Not just to me, but to a lot of folks in Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous. And what happens then is the spark is there. And all you've done is, what you've done is you open the door for somebody to walk through. And it's amazing because that happens every day, somewhere in this world. Because Alcoholics Anonymous is everywhere in this world, believe it or not, even in Russia. So, and I think they may be getting into China too, but they're a little tough on the Christians. So, and they think you got to be a Christian to do this, and you don't. You pick a God of your understanding, your own understanding. Anyway, I'm getting off again, guys, and I apologize for that. But I've got a lot of years of those kinds of stories, and I'm glad of it because it changes my life every day for the better, I should add. Anyway. We do have, what did it in here? I got a disjunction. Sorry. Okay. Well, Susan, again, thank you very much. We're at the point in this program, which generally means the end, and you'd be rid of me for another year. We need to recognize and honor individuals for their support of the RRC. I got to put up with that thing all day, every day. For the support of the center. You could have put this on cue card, Doug. One of those prompter things. Recovery Center, all day, every day, somewhere. Each year we present the Recovery Angel Award to 2 individuals who've been continuous supporters and have gone above and beyond the field of recovery. The first person that I want to recognize, and unfortunately he's not here, figures. His name is Mike Gaylor. Mike's an old friend of mine. Matter of fact, I submitted his name for this award. And unfortunately, or fortunately, it depends on who you are and how you look at it, Mike's wife worked for Apple Drug for many years. She retired near the end of, or the beginning of this year. And when she retired, they planned on doing stuff like everybody, I guess, is retiring wants to do. So the stuff he's doing today is he and his wife are spending a week in Florida because she just got out of her employment. She was on full-time retirement, and the first thing she wanted to do was go to Florida and not spend a weekend or a couple of days or a week. They're down there for a month. So, because they're both older than me, believe it or not, that's one thing. But, I don't know that they've ever really taken a serious vacation since they got married. And so they made a pact that they're going to make, so Mike turned it over to Patty and says, pick a place you want to go. And fortunately for them, they can afford to do that. That's where they are. They're in Florida. They won't be back until the end of the month. So on behalf of Mike Gaylor, R&M Heating and Air Conditioning, and they are good heat and air conditioning mechanics, I will tell you, because they've been fixing ours for about 20 years, 25 years. And Mike's the kind of guy who he doesn't want a name. He doesn't want to be thrown out there as a hero, because that's not the kind of guy he is. He's very, very restrained, not like me, and he'll help anybody who needs it, if he can. So on behalf of his company, R&M Heating and Air Conditioning, I'm going to accept this award today for R&M Heating and Air Conditioning. And I will tell you, he's the same people have been working with him for the same 20 years that I've known him. That'll tell you something about the organization. When these days a lot of tradesmen and folks like that will leave the company, their company they're working for 50 cents an hour more. And we see that all the time. I got out of the industry I used to insure guys like that. And, you know, their manpower turnover was extraordinary. Anyway, so on behalf of R&M Heating, Air Conditioning and Mike Gaylor, I'm going to pick up the award, the Angel Award, the Recovery Angel Award for Mike Gaylor and his company. So let's give him, even though he's not here. It's on record now. I finally put something in that camera that was halfway right. Okay. Old friend, no offense, old friend. But I want to recognize now Bob Cook. Bob has an award he wants to give. Bob is a three-war career soldier, paratrooper. I think he jumped out of his last airplane at the age of about, how old were you? 90, were you 90? He was 90 years old when he jumped out of his last airplane. A perfectly good airplane. It wasn't on fire or anything. He wanted to just jump out of the airplane. He did remember his chute. He's not senile yet, even though he looks it. I love this guy. He means a lot to me. It's all here.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you, Carl.
I'm going to bring my honoree up to stand with me. And Louis, come on up here.
I'll help him, Bob.
Louis Carmen is being honored today by the Recovery Resource Center, or when he was here, it was known as Salisbury Substance Abuse Community Center. Yeah. But Louis, many of you know Louis part of his life, but very quickly, I'm going to tell you the rest of it, because I know all of the phases of his life. First of all, he's a decorated, believe it or not, decorated combat infantryman. He fought in Korea with the 7th Infantry Division. And I didn't get to Korea till much later. But then he came home, and for many years he was the president of Ralph and Gaskell. Some of you old-timers will remember that's a very, very fine clothing, men's clothing store downtown. And he never saw a suit that he couldn't sell me.
That's true.
That's right. And then after that, when Ralph and Gaskell moved, he became the tourism director for Wicomico County. And the beautiful lights that you see along the river every Christmas, that's one of his creations. And after that, he worked on the Aging Commission, and he's largely responsible for the Holmes Ballard Landing and that sort of thing coming here. And finally, Pat asked me for a recommendation, or Lou asked me, where could I work? I'm only 80 years old or something like that. So he wanted another job. So Pat at that time was the chairman of the SAC, and so he hired Lou, and Lou worked for 10 to 15 years at the Recovery Center as our executive director or house manager, whatever he called it. And he held things together. And most of all, he is a wonderful Christian gentleman. And so it is my honor to bestow on him the Angels Award. Lou, God bless you. Congratulations. I don't know where the award is, do you?
Yeah, there it is.
Oh, shit.
I don't know. I can't say anything, really. You don't have to say anything.
No.
You don't have to say anything, just wave to the crowd.
Do what you want.
You don't have to say anything.
Okay. Here, Lou. There it is. Got two of them, one for you and one to hang on the wall at the center.
Yes,
Recovery Angel 2018, Louis Carmen Jr. So there it is.
I can't say anything.
Lou says he can't say anything, so he says thank you, and I'll say thank you on his behalf.
Okay, thank you.
You want me to take this?
Thank you, Lou.
Okay. He's not letting go.
Joe Gast and I hired him when he was no longer the president of Ralph and Gaskell's, and Joe and I were officers on the board at the time. And we got thinking roaming around, and the most logical. He didn't have Butterfingers then. But we went to Lou, and Lou asked the proverbial question, what am I getting into? And we said, well, you find out we need help. The center at that time was coming apart. And Lou was probably one of the best known businessmen in Salisbury at that time, and had been for many, many years. We needed that kind of individual sitting on top of the center, running day-to-day kind of thing. Okay. The last thing that I want to do, I should do, is recognize the folks who helped put this thing together. And we'd like to take this opportunity to thank the entertainment guys. The group is called Such Fools. It's Mickey They're certainly talented musicians. That was Mickey Justice, Dick Morris, and Todd Smith. That was Todd banging away on that bass. Giving you guys really, I'm surprised some of you weren't dancing. Right? Okay. For the breakfast, I want to thank Jerry Fletcher of Jerry Fletcher Catering. Ruth Twilley, Banquet Services Representative for Doug Pointe. Jackie Cassidy from Flowers and Lemon. Hey, Jackie. Okay. There's a photographer here by the name of Ray Vallione Gillette. No? Yes? Thank you. Craig Twilley, Tom Taylor with Pack 14. Courtney West from Salty Social Media. And one of my favorites, Reverend Frida Malcolm, who does so much for our Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous by opening her church to our meeting. And of course, Andre and Susan, thank you so much for coming over here and sharing with us your experience, strength, and hope. Very appreciative. And I'm giving you now permission to bolt.